So it's May 10th, 2021. And earlier in the day, we had a flurry of mad texts from my daughter, Katie, who was asking for some help with a paper she's writing. And her question was, if I've been given 1,000-word limit and I'm 100 words over, is it okay? And you had a response for her. So I thought we would just send a note back to Katie about whether or not that's okay. Take it away.
So my personal opinion is if the teacher asks for under 1,000 words, then make sure it's under 1,000 words. Go back to just skim through that document, take out all the veries, all the indeeds, all the actuallys, take out any words that don't kind of contribute to your argument, and keep it under 1,000 words, and your professor will thank you. Now, I want to say a few more things about writing. One is when I was having some therapy and I went to get help because my life seemed like it was out of control and I had control over nothing. The person I went to said she couldn't really see how I could change anything except that I should do something for myself every week. I was so on overload. I didn't feel like I could follow her dictum there, but I did go back and I could take free courses at the university. These weren't credit courses, these were continuing education courses, and one was on women's writing. So I just thought, okay, I'll just put myself in that class. I won't have to do anything, I'll do the bare minimum that this therapist is asking me to do. That's how I got into a group called Writing for Women. So there were 10 lessons. And on the second lesson, we were all asked to do some writing and then just bring it in, and the teacher would just take a few pieces, critique them, and maybe the whole group would learn from what she could tell from just a small sampling. So I did that. Oh, and I was to have a recurring theme that went through the work. So I did that, passed it in, and then the next week when they were critiqued, it was one of mine, which made me feel pretty like hiding behind a pole in the first place, because I was just not in that class to be totally engaged. But since I was engaged, I listened carefully to her critique and was very grateful for it. And I learned a second thing, Katie, and that is that you write something and then you let somebody else take a look at it, and then you take their feedback, and that there's nothing, you are not cheating. You're just making your argument clear to some other reader besides the reader who's eventually going to mark you. Now I wanted to say one other thing on writing. Oh no, 3 other things. First one is, I guess we're on point 4 now. When I went to university, back to university, it became popular to write in the personal voice, which I didn't believe I had anything to say in the personal voice, but I did know that I could give myself to the professor and then just kind of let somebody else take control of my body and go with their suggestions. So writing in a personal voice, I decided to take hold on that when I was writing an essay about children for the Radical Feminist group. So the writing was about a child, and I had to get into the fact of children needing daycare. So about on the first paragraph, I had to tell the teacher, I've always loved the feeling of a child's hand in mine as we're walking through a pet store. that experience came to me from Mary, with whom I would always go shopping, and the shopping would always lead to the pet store. And I finally just gave up. This child wants to see pets, and I do like the feeling of her hand in mine. So that was kind of my entry into the essay. And the teacher wrote back to me in the line, wrote back to me, I have always loved that feeling too. So it gave me courage to write in the personal voice. I also used to write letters to my relatives, but I would write about my children, about starting with the first, ending with the last, telling a bit about Kelvin and signing off. But there was never anything about me. So I decided the next letter that went out, I was going to test out this thesis that you can write in the I voice. And I wrote 2 pages just about me. That about killed me off. But I tried to kind of keep it neutral, but just not mention them and tell things about me. It wasn't long before I got a phone call. One of my relatives on my husband's side needed to come over and tell me something. She needed to have a personal talk with me. So over she came, and she asked me if I kind of had been so obtuse as to not see that I had not mentioned my children or my husband in that letter, but that it had been all about me, and that how kind of how wrong that was for a woman to just talk about herself. So I didn't, I liked that feedback. It meant I'd done my job. I'd just written about myself as I was practicing writing in the personal voice. It had come through, and it was part of my journey of learning how to write. Back to the writing group, which I entered against my will, but on the uh, kind of fulfilling an obligation that I felt to my therapist. I, at the end of the class, Ria Marinick stood up and said, is there anybody who'd like to continue? We don't all have to pay $200. We can just get together, meet in each other's homes, and continue writing. So I would say about maybe 8 to 10 women decided to do that. Soon the group, soon there was 8 of us, then there was 7 of us. Then my dear friend Karen died, so then there was 6 of us. Now the group gets smaller and smaller, but we still know to get together, to bring our writing, to put it on the table, to let others critique it, and then to take that feedback, because I've had feedback I would never have thought of, really useful feedback. So that's kind of the end of how I learned to write, Katie. I hope just 1 or 2 words will have helped you.